Hello everyone and welcome back to week 4 of the free online course Introduction to Islamic Art at Safe Cultural Heritage Group. Today we will be looking at the so-called Arabic arts of the book, dealing with the following topics. First of all, what do the arts of the book entail and what exactly does Arabic mean in this context? Secondly, we will zoom into a few particularly fascinating examples of illustrated or illuminated manuscripts. And lastly, we will have a brief overview of author and patron portraits in Arabic manuscripts. To start off, what medium are we talking about? The book. Here the term codicology is used to refer to the study of the physical aspects of handwritten books. It is also referred to as the archaeology of the book. It examines the materials, tools, and techniques used, but can also include text analysis, paleography, which is the study of scripts, and the history of illumination and decoration, and also the life of the book in general, from its creation to its transfer to book collections or libraries. Multiple people would work together to create a book. Paper makers preparing the sheets, someone creating the grid of lines for the scribe to write his text on, multiple people sketching, drawing, and painting illustrations or decorations, and finally the bookbinder arranging the pages and creating a sturdy cover. The division into Arabic arts of the book is primarily linguistic, so these include books in the Arabic language versus the Persianate arts of the book with text written in Persian, which we will look at next week. The Arabic language played a great role, not only in Islam but also in science, historical treatises, and poetry. Already under the Umayyads, Greek and Coptic scientific works were translated into Arabic. When these texts were copied, the illustrations were also often adopted in a modified form. Arabic book painting can be traced back to the 11th century. Particularly important was the production of paper, due to which more and more books were produced. The first Arabic paintings are often related to scientific works. For example, the Book of the Constellations of the Fixed Stars. At the Qusur Amra, here to the left, there was already a dome with the stars depicted, and here to the right, an Abbasid ruler commissioned a treatise on astronomy. It was based on earlier Arabic writings, which were in turn referring back to the work of the Greek astronomer Ptolemy. This particular manuscript was copied in 1009, and we can see full-page linear drawings around red dots that represent the stars of the constellations. On these illustrative pages, there is only a short title referring to the zodiac signs themselves and additional words or phrases referring to the stars. To the right is the depiction of Virgo, faintly reminiscent of the Samara dances we saw last week, for example in the folds of the robe. The proportions are a bit off, which is due to the copying process. Compared to the drawing of Leo to the right, we see a more naturalistic looking lion with more shading within the contour lines and the depiction of hair. Arab poets often used animals as literary motifs, and one of the earliest Arabic non-religious works of literature had animals as heroes. The fable book called Kalila and Dimna, named after two jackals, who are the main characters. It is actually the Arabic version of an older collection of Indian animal stories referred to as Panchatantra. It was meant to serve as a mirror for princes, as the animals better conveyed the moral of the story, so they were supposed to teach the princes proper etiquette. It is told in a frame narrative, starting with the king asking the philosopher to tell him a story about a particular topic. Then the philosopher will use the talking animals to convey an underlying meaning. These animals in turn may as well tell a story, so you have stories within the story. For example, the jackal Dimna, who serves the Lion King, is trying to ease his fear of a strange noise he hears. Here you can see both of them in conversation as they are turned towards each other to the left. Dimna's mouth is opened because the jackal tells the lion not to be afraid and refers to a fox who once saw a drum hung over a tree which emitted loud, dangerous sounds because of the wind. So the fox thought that this must be a powerful enemy that would taste deliciously. As such, he bit into the drum, but it was actually empty. You can see this on the right. So the moral of the story is that not anything or anyone that is noisy and appears mighty actually is. Another story is about the lion and the hare, here in different manuscripts. Basically, it tells the story of a lion who is appeased by regular sacrifices of the animals in the forest. One day, a hare is chosen, but this one wants to get rid of the lion, so he pretends to be the guard of the chosen victim who was allegedly eaten by another lion. The angry lion then wants to challenge his presumed rival, and the hare pretends to lead him to the other's den, which is in fact a deep pit filled with water. When looking down, the lion sees his own and the hare's reflection and believes it to be his rival and the sacrificial animal. He jumps into the pit to fight, but he drowns, and the animals do not have to sacrifice anyone again. So here we have a story about outwitting someone who is physically stronger than yourself. Combining animal depictions and science, there is a famous book on mechanical devices from northern Mesopotamia, commissioned by a sultan from his court engineer Al-Jazari in 1206. It is a book of automata based on mathematical and mechanical discoveries by Greek scholars. The so-called elephant clock is well known, showing the hours in 3 different ways. I quote here Andrew Robinson. The timing mechanism is based on a water-filled basin hidden inside the elephant. In the bucket is a deep bowl floating in the water, but with a small hole in the center. The bowl takes half an hour to fill through this hole. In the process of sinking, the bowl pulls a string attached to a seesaw mechanism in the tower on the top of the elephant. This releases a ball that drops into the mouth of a serpent, causing the serpent to tip forward, which pulls the sunken ball out of the water via strings. At the same time, a system of strings causes a figure in the tower to raise either their left or right hand and the elephant driver to hit a drum. This indicates a half or full hour. Next, the snake tips back. The cycle then repeats as long as balls remain in the upper reservoir to power the emptying of the bowl. There are quite a few modern reproductions of this mechanism. Here you can see one to the left. Okay, now let us have a look at a manuscript of which hundreds of copies have survived. A dozen are also illustrated of the so-called maqamat, or assemblies of Al-Hariri. It must have been a bestseller at the time, as a popular Arabic literary genre with entertaining anecdotes, usually about rogues, written in rhymed prose. Here there are 50 chapters narrated by Al-Harith about the hero Abu Zaid, a roguish wanderer. They meet repeatedly, and the narrator recounts Abu Zaid's eloquence and wit when talking to different groups of people from all over the societal strata. They are humoristic adventure stories with puns and riddles, which basically show how Abu Zaid talks his way out of difficult situations or enthralls the crowd by witty wordplay. In this 13th century copy, the illustrator Al-Wasiti created particularly interesting scenes with lots of references to everyday life. Here we have Abu Zaid and his companion in the foreground, talking to a man. The hilly middle ground shows animals in a lush landscape and water, while the background shows a panorama-like view of a village. To the left, at the back, you can see a date tree next to a mosque, with a dome and a minaret, like we've seen in week 2, even with inscription panels on the facade. The domed brick structures in the middle likely refer to a vaulted bazaar with different traders and customers. To the right, we see a different rectangular structure, which is probably a fortified city wall with a gate. There are different domestic animals such as a buffalo, goats, and a rooster with a hen on the roof. The backdrop is a rather intimate and dynamic scenery of everyday village life. In the middle, there is perhaps a mother with her daughter. Next to them, a man and a woman are arguing, and in the window to the right, we see a woman maybe calling someone with very lively gestures. To the far right, there is even a woman spinning thread. But this is only the backdrop of the scene, and the figures of the hero and his companion in the foreground are a lot taller on their camels. One of the camels has perhaps impatiently raised one of his hind legs. The different surface textures and clothes are shown in intricate detail and vibrant colors. Also, their gestures to one another show that they are deep in conversation, and this is something to look out for in all Arabic paintings. Genre painting, or scenes of everyday life, are also included in the Book of Antidotes, or Kitab al-Diryak, written in 1198, based on a Greek author and expanded upon. Here, there is an interesting interplay of different elements within the page layout. We see that the whole text panel is framed by a thin red line, and that the sections are also differentiated by these lines. At the top and the bottom, we have 2 text panels of 4 to 5 lines in Naskh, a very legible script. Then we see the heading panel with large blue letters in angular or Kufic script before a golden background of floral scrolls and arabesques. We have seen these techniques already on inscription panels on the facades of mosques and palaces. Underneath, there are 2 horizontal strips on top of one another, including figures, animals, and vegetation. At the top left is the doctor Andromakos, who sends a servant to bring food to the workers in the field. The servant carries a tray with bowls and a jug in his other hand. The other figures are depicted side by side in various agricultural activities. As such, the painting does not directly illustrate the text, but adds additional elements. This has been either interpreted as depicting the seasons, so digging up, cutting, harvesting, sifting, and oxen plowing the field. Another possible interpretation is that the patron of the book owned land himself, and wanted to have his knowledge of agriculture represented. There are faint and spare ground lines, but no background. The picture space is sometimes even too narrow for the figures, who are bending down to fit into the frame. The figures are divided by these large green plants you can see. Also, the figures all have a halo around their heads, which serves not to represent their holiness, but to highlight the individual figures' heads. And we will see this also later on. Let's now turn to our third part, the author and patron frontispieces, or opening pages of the manuscripts. I would like to start with the author frontispiece, where I would like to introduce two of them, one with a single author and another one with multiple authors. The first example is the frontispiece of the book De Materia Medica, written by the Greek herbalist Dioscurides. It shows the author and two figures within an architectural frame. The use of architecture as a background device was already established in ancient Greece and Rome, with arches, columns, and ornate capitals. Here, the stylized frame with the golden background is typically Byzantine. This particular format was often used for Christian author portraits, for example the evangelists, here to the left. Also, luxurious furniture was adopted to emphasize the figure's status and to refer to antiquity. The figure on the right is wearing a Roman tunica, characterizing him as an ancient sage, while the Islamic turban adds a contemporary touch. The seated person could be identified as Dioscurides, who refers to the approaching figures on the opposite page. Remember when I talked about the importance of gestures? The two pages are linked through these gestures. They appear very formal. As such, the figures on the left, completely clad in Arabic garments, could be seen as patrons, but possibly they are also pupils who queue up to present the copied book to the original author. A different double frontispiece and finispiece can be found here, showing the authors of the book titled The Choicest Maxims and Best Sayings by Al-Mubashir. In the frontispieces, 7 half-figures are inscribed in an ornamentally divided field, reminiscent of metalwork. These forms can be compared to arabesques, and the tradition of showing figures within these ornaments is already established at this point. There are also Byzantine comparable works with busts of figures. Here they wear Arab garments and are either occupied with their own tasks and gadgets or gesturing to one another in what seem to be intense discussions. The double finispiece here, or the closing pages, shows full body depictions of the authors. 4 are sitting down and 2 are standing and looking up, with their hands raised as if debating something. It has been argued that these Greek scholars are adopted as part of an Islamic past, here shown as emblems. Again, the decoration is comparable to Quran illumination, here to the left. Lastly, we now turn to the frontispieces with a patron portrait. If we look at the Kitab al-Aghani, or book of songs, from the early 13th century, with its multiple frontispieces, we see the patron either enthroned, on horseback, or giving an audience. There is an emphasis on the princely features of the ruler, as opposed to the scholarly features of the author portraits we just saw. He is wearing ornate clothes, and here he is sitting under a canopy that winged figures hold over his head. They highlight the status of the figure, who is surrounded by his entourage. On the right, we see the patron sitting, flanked by his attendants again. There is another zone added underneath, 5 women sitting cross-legged in a half circle, playing different instruments or holding objects. Similar depictions can be found on metal vessels, all of which illustrate typical scenes of courtly life. Another frontispiece shows the patron on horseback during a procession with his attendants. The patron and his horse are again larger than the other figures. In the other one, on the left, horse and rider fill almost the entire frame, and the grass, flowers, and water localize the scene as outdoors. It is a very dynamic composition with a falcon, which is a typical animal for hunting pastime activities associated with the elite. In another frontispiece, the patron is seated in 3/4 profile, giving an audience to 2 approaching figures here to the left. He is again depicted larger, and he holds a sword, suggesting Arabic influence. The other 2 figures are identified as a Christian bishop and a Turkish military leader. They are distinguished by the headdress and clothing. This composition has the same prototype as the one on the right we see here, from the Book of Antidotes that we already saw before, with multiple registers surrounding the patron. The person before him is roasting meat on skewers. Above, horsemen are hunting deer, and below there is a group of figures, including women, to the right. Particularly interesting are the red background and the juxtaposition of different themes and scenes. To conclude, we saw a lot of different genres of Arabic literature today, and various paintings, starting from the zodiac drawings and fables serving to educate young princes, to scientific treatises, including the elephant clock, and humorous adventure stories that are very densely illustrated. We then had a look at author portraits that often relate back to antique or Byzantine traditions, and lastly, the patron portraits that were more closely related to the contemporary elite, their courtly life, and their favorite pastimes. Even though we were talking about a new medium today, the book, we actually saw many aspects that we've come across in our earlier lectures, from architecture, decoration, inscriptions, and imperial iconography. I hope you enjoyed today's lecture. Thank you very much for listening. Next week, we will talk about the Persianate arts of the book. Check out the online classroom for assignments and notifications, and above all, stay tuned for next week's lecture. Bye-bye.